In October of 1973, the director of the Oak Ridge National Laboratory walked into his office and found a termination letter on his desk. His name was Alvin Weinberg, and his crime was believing in the wrong kind of reactor. J.R. Majewski, I spent 23 years working in the technology that replaced his, and I know what he built. I know why they killed it, and I know what we gave away. By the end of this video, you're going to be kind of angry about it. Last year, India switched on a reactor called the PFBR, the prototype fast breeder reactor in Kalpakan, and that's first criticality. That means the reactor achieved a self-sustaining nuclear chain reaction for the first time. It's the moment a machine becomes a power source. After 50 years of planning, engineering, and political will, India crossed that line. Here's what makes the PFBR different from every reactor currently operating here in the US. It produces more fuel than it consumes. Yeah, you heard me. It's not a misprint. A fast breeder reactor takes the spent fuel from a conventional reactor, the material that we call waste, and uses it as feedstock. And as it burns, it converts non-fissile uranium-238 into plutonium-239, a fissile material, usable fuel. Run the cycle long enough and the reactor starts generating more than it started with. You stop depending on fresh uranium. You stop depending on anyone, really. And India sits on 25% of the world's thorium reserves. Homi Bhabha, India's first nuclear chief, designed a 3-stage national program in 1954 specifically to reach this point. Stage 1, conventional heavy water reactors to build a plutonium inventory. Stage 2, fast breeders to close the fuel cycle. And Stage 3, thorium reactors running on the fuel the first 2 stages produced. India just completed Stage 2. And they've been executing this plan for 70 years. Now, remember that number because we'll get back to it. But here's what gets kind of insane about all this. India didn't invent this technology. We did. Oak Ridge National Lab, Tennessee, a team of engineers, they fired up the molten salt reactor experiment, the MSRE. They ran it for 4 years straight at full operational power. What those 4 years produced, it's not a theory. It's operational data. Molten salt reactors don't use pressurized water. The fuel is dissolved directly into a fluoride salt coolant. The salt flows through the core, generates heat, moves through a heat exchanger. There's no pressurized vessel, no zirconium fuel rod cladding, no high pressure coolant loop that could rupture, and if the reactor overheats, the salt will drain by gravity into a holding tank below the core. Chain reaction would stop. The reactor would shut itself down. So no operator actions required. No emergency power. No emergency core cooling system. Like I said, I spent 23 years working inside plants where ECCS readiness was a operational reality. Loss of offsite power drills at 3 a.m., loop scenarios. I know exactly what it costs to maintain every system that's designed to prevent the failure modes that the MSRE eliminated. Weinberg's reactor didn't have those failure modes, and the government shut it down. They shut it down because the right answer was the wrong answer for the people making money. Now, here's what's happening in Washington in '72. The Atomic Energy Commission had spent 2 decades building an entire industrial base around the light water reactor, enrichment facilities, fuel fabrication, zirconium supply, pressurized vessels. Every contractor, every national lab, every facility in the country was structured around this singular design. And Weinberg's molten salt reactor made all of that look like second best. And he wasn't quiet about it. He wrote papers, testified before Congress. He said publicly that the light water reactor was not the optimal path for American energy. And in 1972, the AEC director told him to stop. But he kept going. In October '73, got the letter on his desk. Now, the steelman argument for this, and it deserves a fair hearing, is the light water reactor was not a bad design. It was proven. It was buildable at commercial scale. It had an operational track record. And the MSRE had only run at research scale. And scaling an experimental design to commercial operation is pretty extensive and sometimes uncertain. and the AEC was not wrong to want a proven technology. But there's a difference between we need more time to develop something and we are going to shut it down, defunding, terminating, especially the scientists who built it. They didn't pause the program, they killed it. And there's also the fact that light water reactors produce plutonium-239 as a byproduct, weapons grade. In 73, was not a disadvantage in DC. The molten salt thorium cycle does not produce weapons grade material. They fired the man who built a reactor that could not make a bomb for them in favor of one that could. Washington special. So while the MSRE program sat in a filing cabinet, other countries like India were reading our published research. We published it. It was public. China, they launched a formal molten salt reactor program in 2011. Their TMSR at Wuwei achieved its first operational test in 23. India, well, they executed Baba's 70-year blueprint exactly as written. Right now, the U.S. operates 93 commercial nuclear reactors, and every one of them uses enriched uranium. Every one of them has a pressurized cooling system. Every one of them was designed using technology finalized before 1975. It's obvious, folks, we're not running the best available reactor. We're running the reactor that won the political fight. I remember the number from the beginning. 4 years of clean operational data at Oak Ridge. No meltdown, no loss of coolant, no pressurized vessel failure. India kept that number. We put it in a drawer. Now, I want to be direct about all this. The engineering knowledge is not gone. It's in the people. The NRC is currently reviewing advanced reactor license applications for the first time in quite some time. TerraPower, well, they're building a sodium-cooled reactor in Kemmerer, Wyoming, with a federal license application that's on file. The window's not closed, but the gap is real. Now, India, they're running a reactor from a program designed before most of their engineers were born. China read our research and already built it. And we are still running the technology Weinberg wanted to replace. I know what the people inside this industry can do, folks. This country produced Alvin Weinberg. It produced the MSRE. It produced the technical knowledge that 2 other countries used to get ahead of us. The question is not whether we can build a better reactor, because we've already done that. The question is whether Washington will get out of the way long enough to let America build again. October 1973, Alvin Weinberg walked out of the Oak Ridge with a termination letter. He was right. They knew he was right. They fired him anyway. Now, if you want to see the other program Washington killed that never came back, the next video is on Project Pluto. You might find that to be worse.